Hello, hi Quetza, good morning. We're standing just around the time of the meeting of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature outside the COP30 in Belem, Brazil. I'd like you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Quetza. I'm a Garn Youth Hub facilitator, and I also practice ceremonies and work with indigenous communities and tribal councils to see how I can mix the rights of nature with indigenous sovereignty. So a lot of my work focuses on those two movements.
Are you also an Indigenous youth yourself?
I am reclaiming my indigenous youth. Yes,
Okay.
I was born outside of territory or outside of my traditional ancestral lands, but I am practicing Aztec dance and ceremonies in my traditional ways, and so I'm currently learning, just how to reconnect, and I hope to inspire other youth to also reconnect with their lineages.
Fantastic. And so, which lineage would you be?
I am Mexica, so in English would be Aztec, but Mexica would be in the Nahuatl language.
So, you're also bridging Central America, Mexico, Turtle Island, North America.
Yeah, definitely. It's the Mesoamerica and Turtle Island. Yeah, because I was born on Turtle Island, and I happen to know a lot of comrades and colleagues like in Turtle Island. But I also have a big calling to reconnect with my ancestral lands too. So yeah.
And how did that happen? Because a lot of indigenous or other community youth, once they go out and get so-called educated in the modern world, don't necessarily want to come back and reclaim identity, like you're saying. Sometimes they even want to sort of be as far away from their indigenous roots. So how did it happen differently for you?
Yeah, it's I remember like the moment that I wanted to learn more was when I first heard the drum of the Aztec drum. Someone invited me because I had feather earrings at a concert, and they was like, "Oh, you indigenous?" And at the moment in 2019, I said no. But he's like, "Oh, you look indigenous. You should come to like where are you from?" I'm like, "I'm from Mexico," and all these things. And so then he was like, "You got to come to like my circle." Went to his circle, and that first time that I heard the drum, I felt like something kind of awoke, or like a remembering. And then ever since then, I've been on this path because I feel like it's one of my callings to reconnect and to learn our traditional ways.
So the traditional drum beat and your heartbeat kind of
Yeah,
came together.
yeah, definitely.
Wonderful. So, in terms of a youth reclaiming your indigenous roots, what is the kind of stuff that you're doing or wanting to do?
Yeah, I think it mostly focuses on how we can bridge intergenerational kind of knowledge, because I feel like with COVID, a lot of elders passed away. And so on Turtle Island, this is a big thing that people, language speakers, language preservers, like passed away. And then also in Mesoamerica, I hear from some of my colleagues and relatives down there that there was also a loss of people who know a lot about ceremony or like Aztec dance or sweat ceremonies. And so there's like this urgency to make sure that the younger generations receive this knowledge before it's too late, right? And so then as we see a lot of other things happening around the world, it's like I think we're being positioned to almost reinvent a way that like youth can get this information from elders, because usually sometimes some of these ceremonial processes take a long time, but we don't have a long time, right? So it's an interesting timing for me to also be in this space, right? Like where I'm receiving a lot of information from elders or from people, wisdom keepers, that I don't think I would have gotten if there wasn't an urgency like globally. So I think what I try to do is share this with other youth so that they can also be interested and find their own ways if they're outside of my lineage. And I build a lot of relationships with native youth around Turtle Island and right here in the global south or in South America, or Abya, which is how we say North and South America in an indigenous tongue. So yeah, I build bridges. I want everyone to know about rights of nature that's native, and I want all native people to know about just like that they're connected to a global community that can help them for their own struggles, because I know that the communities have different battles or have different things that they're obstacles that they're facing, and so I want to bridge them with people who can help, whether they're indigenous or not. I think we got to build a big community, and so a lot of my work focuses on bringing all this collective power and collective community to one place.
Amazing. Tell me, the sort of a lot of the indigenous peoples are also fighting for territorial self-determination, autonomy of some sort. So though of course everybody is within nation states, but then even within that kind of a framework, trying to say that no, we need to govern autonomously, but also connect across borders, the artificial borders that nation states. Is that the sort of thing also that you work on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've heard it from a couple elders, autonomous self-determination, because self-determination by the UN definition doesn't do enough, right? They still control the funds, they still control governance, or they still can approve or disapprove certain projects. So indigenous people have found out it's got to be autonomous self-determination, that they have to be in control of their territories, their water, their projects on their land, which confronts the state, right? And so I do educate youth about this, about it is like it's going to be one of the biggest battles of our time, to really feel empowered and supported to be able to kind of say these things very openly, because there are elders that are cautious about this because they know it brings risk, right? I think elders and communities have dealt with so much suffering, and so it's not an easy thing for a young person to be so fiery and so like against the state. So there's a balance, but I think that like if we can talk about it in circles and around the fire or in ceremony, we can find a way to really uphold those that autonomy that I think is going to be the key for all movements across the world right now. So yeah, I talk about it a lot, and I'm also learning what it means, right? What it means to invite more autonomy for myself, and also how can I learn from communities and territories that are autonomous right now. What do they do? Like, I'm trying to investigate, learn, because I know it's a accumulation of different processes, and a very, very strong determination to be autonomous once the community decides that's what they want. And so, yeah, I'm learning.
Absolutely. And you're also part of the Rights of Nature movement. So when indigenous peoples or other communities are fighting for autonomy and self-determination and their own decision-making processes, do you have ways by which you actually bring voices of the rest of nature into that, or what some of us are calling earthy governance?
Yeah, I think I would. I'm thinking a lot about this right now. I think that in the U.S. or on Turtle Island, it's a little bit more clear because there are tribal councils or tribal governance, right? Because the Turtle Island, at least for the most part, has a little bit of clear directions of like where tribes are at, and what tribes are federally recognized, although that's a whole different story. But with tribal governance, if we can include the rights of nature, then it can be pluralistic, right? Because then certain tribes in California, where I'm based in right now, have different sacred animals and sacred beings, right? That there's lakes, there are waters, there's different tribes, there's different bands within the tribe. And so if we can include in their governance structure, or if I can introduce, or anyone introduces rights of nature into the traditional tribal constitution, then from there we can kind of build autonomy, right? Because then the community needs to be in agreement that we're going to start to have these voices for these species, or these not like more than human living beings, and then from there we can see how we can confront the state, saying that these are our values, these are our perspectives. Because if it's in the constitution or the tribal governance structure, then we have a point of reference for why we're doing this. And I think the rights of nature combined with indigenous sovereignty and indigenous governance makes it that much more powerful, because then you use two different movements against the state, right? And so you have tribal, the rights of indigenous people and the rights of nature. So instead of just using the rights of nature, we use both indigenous rights and rights of nature. Of course, we know that, like, those of us in the movement know that they're always connected, but the state doesn't know that, right? They try to make us like separated. So if we pull them together, I think it allows a stronger movement to build.
And in a way, would it not be a sort of a natural outcome of traditional governance structures? I mean, for instance, I'm sure a lot of the indigenous peoples in Turtle Island would look at what is the buffalo going to say, right, about what we're doing, right? So naturally, it's kind of, they don't call it rights of nature, of course, but naturally it's already there. So it's probably not too much of a struggle to combine these.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that the only criticism with rights of nature from a tribal perspective or from an indigenous perspective, at least from my experience, is that they worry about the legal language, right? Yes. But this is a bunch of this is based on distrust and real harm that Western and colonial systems have caused indigenous people. So it makes sense why there's this fear or hesitancy. But I do think, like how you said, that they're already there. I think the rights of nature movement does have to like work on this, the language, and how do we introduce it so that we can come in a good way. We, something I've said before is that, like, we shouldn't start with a conference or a meeting. We should start with a ceremony, and then we have the conference and meeting, because Indigenous people will respect that you come in a good way, not to impose your proposal or your idea, your project. Is like, hey, I want to share space with you. Let's pray about it, and then let's talk about it, right? So I think that we also, from the Rights of Nature movement, need to be aware that we can't. That there's other alternative ways to introduce the rights of nature, because it's already happening. It's more of like, how do we come together to reach that common language so that it can be incorporated in a way that we know will protect the tribe and will protect the rights of these rights of nature in the community in the long term. Because I do see we're creating a future, right? And it starts with like some of the legal stuff, although it might not be apparent to Indigenous folks because they are just surviving and struggling. But we are co-constructing right now so that we can protect the future.
And also with law, there are multiple versions of law, right? So legal pluralism in some sense, customary law, which is already there, which may not be in the national statutes, but is what Indigenous peoples and other communities have been working with. So again, there's a natural fit. And I mean, I'm completely with you in saying that we need to look at what language would make people comfortable, you know, because conventional Western conservation has come in, imposed, it's displaced people, it's disregarded their own knowledge systems. I'm glad to hear you actually talking about how we need to be much more sensitive about the language we use and how we go in a way that is respectful, mutually respectful. So that's great to hear. Anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, I think I would just add that like this struggle, this time, you know, it's been I guess prophesized, right? That this difficulty is not something that we should be fearful, but actually more determined to know that like if we come together, we're being forced together through community, right? And if some of us have built communities around the globe, like we're fortunate enough through the Rights of Nature and through GARN, then we have a role, we have a responsibility to bridge those folks, right? I know sometimes it's a lot of work that some of us already do, and there's still more work to do, but I think that like it's all for collective liberation, it's all for the common well-being of life, of nature, of coexistence. And I think these values, although sometimes they sound cheesy for youth, like, you know, as you get older and as you become an emerging leader, you start to notice that this is all what's about, right? I want everyone to have food, to have housing, to have a place to relax, to have fun, and to not be worried about like not having any or enough, right? Because that's a very capitalistic idea that's been imposed on us, that we don't have enough. This planet, Mother Earth, is so abundant that I think that's why we work so hard now, so that we can all enjoy that for the future.
Abundance and sufficiency. So, yeah. Fantastic. Thanks. We're actually very inspired that young people are actually coming into this movement, reclaiming their heritage and their roots across the world, people like you. And hopefully we also, through the global tapestry of alternatives, can kind of contribute to this growing local to global movement.
Yes.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much. Yeah.